Welcome to an invitation to reimagine retirement. My name is Marino. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of Transitus Wealth Partners. Today, we'll explore the human side of retirement. But before we begin, I have a very important question. What is the greatest song of all time? I wondered about this a while ago, so I walked through our office, stopped people in the hallways, I poked my head through doorways, and I asked that question. The answers were diverse. There were songs by Lynyrd Skynyrd and Carole King, Beethoven and the Beach Boys, some newer songs and bands I'd never heard of, others I grew up with, like Hotel California by the Eagles and Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Me, I went with Superstition by Stevie Wonder. I love Stevie. How about you? What do you think is the greatest song of all time? I guess it depends on how you define greatest. What if greatest meant the most played song ever? What do you think the most played song ever is? I'll give you some clues. The most played song ever was never a hit single, had virtually no airtime on top 40 radio, and it was written by the Sherman Brothers. Any guesses? It was first played in 1964 at the New York World's Fair on a pavilion. And the name of the ride? It's a Small World by Walt Disney. The song It's a Small World plays more than 1,000 times a day at Walt Disney parks. If you start counting from 1964, consider how many times it played at the World's Fair, and add multiple Disney parks worldwide, you get more than 50 million. That's how many times this song has been played. I'm married with 2 daughters. Our family loves Disney. We have ridden It's a Small World and heard that song more times than I can count. So what is it about this ride that's so captivating? It's not some $25 million roller coaster or some high-tech big budget experience, but people love it. I think it relates to retirement. I've been having conversations with people about retirement since the 1990s. I'd often ask, what are your plans when you retire? Can you guess what the number one answer is? Travel. Almost everyone says they look forward to traveling. They've spent years working hard, being frugal, saving money and investing, maybe raising kids. They're looking forward to retiring one day and enjoying travel, among many other things. And in some ways, retirement is the grown-up version of It's a Small World. It's exciting to think about. Well, what kind of travel are you looking forward to? Some people want to be in the mountains where they can relax and watch the sunset. Maybe you want to travel in Europe or cruise the Caribbean. Or travel means renting a house on the beach and inviting the whole family, or not the whole family. If you're like most people, you look forward to some type of travel during retirement. And yes, retirement is like It's a Small World sometimes, but at other times, it's more like Space Mountain. Have you ridden this ride? Do you know about it? It's an indoor roller coaster, also at Disney. It's fast, pitch black, you can't see where you're going. One moment you're coasting along, and then, without warning, you twist and you turn, you're whipped all over the place. The worst part, you have no control. Now, this kind of experience, it's also part of retirement. One moment you're coasting along, and then in an instant, life happens, and you have no idea what's next. This uncertainty, which is part of life, it makes planning for the future challenging. Today, as we reimagine retirement, we're going to talk about how to approach and navigate those challenges. This presentation is co-created by Susan Bradley, the founder of the Financial Transitionist Institute, and myself. It's designed for someone either approaching retirement or recently retired. If you've been researching retirement, you may have noticed how much of the information, the books, websites, podcasts, it's about the financial side. And really, most financial advisors, they just want to talk about your money. Even though people know retirement is a big lifestyle change, it's just not discussed as much. And over the years, I've been asked why it's so important to talk about the human side in addition to the financial side. And people find it helpful when I explain my background and how I became so passionate about the human side of financial planning. Back in the 1990s, my wife and I were living in Florida. We decided to move to Wilmington, North Carolina, where I planned to open a new financial planning office. Within 30 days of arriving in Wilmington, I suffered a serious back injury. I couldn't sit, I could barely stand. And instead of opening a new office in an office building and launching my career, I spent the next 6 years working out of a room over my garage, mostly lying on the floor on a bunch of pillows or in a recliner. And this is my first major lesson that when life happens, and it will, plans need to change. On the personal side, I have a daughter with special needs and I'm a caregiver for my wife. These situations also make planning for the future challenging. Of course, I'm not special. Life disrupts everyone's plans at some point in time. One day, life's calm, like you're floating through It's a Small World, and then something happens, it's Space Mountain. After observing this for so many years, I had a light bulb moment that caused me to rethink my whole approach to financial planning. Here's what I realized. The financial decisions we make during major life events like retirement, divorce, death of a spouse or a family member, these decisions have the greatest impact on our future net worth and quality of life. Say it again. The financial decisions we make during major life events have the greatest impact on our future net worth and quality of life. When life happens and plans need to change, understanding how to navigate the twists and turns of life is just as important as financial knowledge. Once I realized that, I began a journey to understand how people think and feel and how that influences their decisions. Early in my research, I was fortunate to meet Susan Bradley, the founder and CEO of the Financial Transitionist Institute. And in addition to working together on this presentation, we also co-authored a book titled Shaping Change: How to Respond When Life Disrupts Your Retirement Plan. Thinking about and planning for the future is important, but so is navigating the twists and turns of life. That means we need to talk about the human side of retirement and not just the financial side. Here's our agenda for today. There's 4 parts to this presentation. It's going to last about 30 minutes. All right, you ready? Let's get started. Part 1, the old view of retirement versus the new view of retirement. The old view was the feeling that you put in your time, you finished working, and you were ready to ride off into the sunset. Now, this was common for my parents' generation, probably yours too. I recall having conversations about retirement many years ago. Guess what the number one question was? Almost everyone asked, am I going to be okay? The focus was on the money. People had spent decades saving, investing, being frugal, and making sacrifices. Now, they wanted to make sure they could handle whatever came their way financially. It's normal to worry about what could go wrong and wonder if you'll be okay. I mean, who wants to run out of money and be a burden to their family? Even if you know you're in good shape financially, you still want to protect what you have and maybe leave something for family members or a charity. It's important as ever to know that you'll be okay financially. We still talk about that. But now the conversations are shifting. You may not want to live to age 100, but you might anyway. You may be retired for as many or even more years as you were working. On the plus side, you should have more freedom to live life on your terms. And it can be exciting to think about that. But the future is unknown and full of twists and turns. We don't want to endlessly dwell on what could go wrong, but it's normal to worry, especially if you haven't answered the question, am I going to be okay financially? So what should you do? Well, first things first, you got to get your ducks in a row. This means getting organized, specifically all the financial stuff. It means knowing what you own, what you owe, if anything, and considering what-if scenarios. I'm sure you've been doing this at different points throughout your life. When you're planning for retirement, there's a lot of ducks to think about. You probably want to travel. Actually, I have a duck for that. Here's a travel duck. You need to plan for it. And what if you want to upgrade your home, or a new roof is in your future, or some other modification to your home? Well, contractors aren't cheap. You know, I got a duck for the contractors. Yeah, got a whole bunch of ducks. And how about healthcare expenses? What if you have to go to a nursing home? And that could be the most expensive duck of all. As you're getting organized, your goal is to reach a point where you feel like you have a handle on everything. Here's an observation after 30 plus years as an advisor. People who have their ducks in a row during retirement, in general, have less daily stress and anxiety about the future. Because when you're organized, you can worry less about what could go wrong and think more about what to get right. That's actually our mission at Transitus Wealth Partners. Worry less doesn't mean no worries. Here's something I've learned from 30 plus years of being married. Things I worry about, my wife may not. Things she worries about, I may not. We can't convince each other to feel differently. Now I know because I've tried this. It does not work. Honey, you shouldn't feel that way. Anybody ever said that? Yeah, I said that many, many years ago, of course. How we feel about money and what we worry about is mostly driven by how we grew up, specifically before the age 10, and our experiences with money throughout our lives. We're all different. We always will be. Now, when I work with couples, this is something we spend time on. Being on the same page and making joint decisions doesn't mean you and your spouse think and feel the same way. It just means you both agree on a path forward. Here's another observation. People who do this well, meaning they think intentionally about what to get right, these people have the most fulfilling lives. I've observed it my entire career. So what is it you need to get right? Well, that's up to you. Let's start by reviewing some areas where intentional people focus their efforts. If you're like most people, you want to be healthy. And it's more than physical health. Notice the words on this slide. What jumps out at you? A healthy lifestyle includes managing stress in relationships. It's having fun. It's seeking balance. It's keeping your brain healthy and being active. Here's a question. Which aspect of being healthy influences satisfaction during retirement the most? What do you think? According to research, retirement satisfaction and overall well-being are most influenced by the health of your relationships. They're correlated. This means what you do during retirement is important, but whom you do it with, even more so. We're now learning how the odds of suffering from many age-related diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's can be reduced by making better lifestyle choices. So let's do a quick summary. Here's the insight so far. Getting your ducks in a row and becoming organized can lower daily stress and anxiety. People with the most fulfilling lives in general are intentional about what they want to get right. And satisfaction in retirement is correlated to the quality of your relationships. Transitioning to retirement often involves big financial decisions. Let's talk about a way to approach those decisions. Who remembers this movie? Any fans of Steve Martin and John Candy out there? Do you remember this scene? It's from a classic movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. They're driving down the highway and they look to the right and they see another car driving in the same direction they are. Steve Martin's a little confused, can't figure out why there's a car on that side, but then he notices these people are yelling something to him. What are they yelling? "You're going the wrong way." And Steve Martin says to John Candy, "They know where we're going." It's a pretty funny scene. Well, in fact, they were going the wrong way. They're driving on the wrong side of the road, straight into traffic. They look up, it's too late. 2 semi-trucks are coming right at them. The next scene's pretty crazy. Life is funny. We may choose a direction that makes sense at the time, but then realize it's the wrong way. Do you remember the light bulb moment I described earlier? The most impactful financial decisions happen during transitions or life events. For retirement, the most impactful financial decisions are often big purchases. Generally, something that needs a key. Think RVs, boats, vacation homes, etc. You know the joke about boat owners, right? What are the 2 happiest days in a boat owner's life? The day they buy it, the day they sell it. Have you ever wondered why? Someone goes from being so excited to indifferent or even sick of the boat. So what happened? Something changed. Same joke can be applied to RVs and other big ticket items. Many people lost interest and wanted to sell, or life happened and plans just needed to change. Doesn't mean it was a wrong decision when it was made. It just means people needed to change direction. Here's the most common situation I've seen where recently retired people abruptly change direction. Let's say someone's a parent and they live away from their child or children. Then a transition happens. One day, this person is a parent. The next day, they're a grandparent. For some people, holding their grandchild for the first time is the most wonderful thing ever. And they decide they're moving. That's it. Life happened. They're a grandparent. Plans are changing. If you made any big purchases leading up to this moment, it could be expensive to change direction. We always want to consider how life can happen in an instant and that our plans may need to change. And in light of that, let's look at an option for making big financial decisions. Try before you buy, rent before you own. I have way too many anecdotes about big financial decisions people made that didn't work out. Here's one question you can use to think through big decisions. Ask yourself, if your plans needed to change 1 or 2 years from now, how would that impact your finances? What if you had to sell the RV or boat? What would that cost you? What if you had to sell the vacation home in 2 years? Let me be more specific. What if the vacation home declined in value 2 years from now, and then you had to sell? These are good what if questions to think about as you plan your transition to retirement. Now let's move on to part 2. We started with the old view of retirement and compared it to the new view. Now we'll discuss transitions or life events. This includes retirement or any other major life event like divorce, death of a family member, selling a business, inheriting money, etc. Odds are you've experienced more than one life-changing event or transition. You know, when life happens, the world around you changes. And more importantly, you change. Transitions impact how you think and feel. It's an ongoing process. All transitions have stages. The model we use from the Financial Transitionist Institute includes 4 stages. The first is anticipation. This is when the life event is imminent. For example, you set a date to retire, not 5 years from now, maybe 6 months from now. Suddenly, the idea of retiring gets real, and the emotional roller coaster takes off. One day, you're excited about the possibilities as you imagine what retirement could be like. The freedom to live life on your terms. The next day, you're worried about being bored or depressed or whether you'll be okay financially. Second stage is ending. This is the event. Your last day at work was Friday. You wake up Saturday morning and you're retired. For decades, you've been working hard, been busy. Life was structured and challenging. You had lots of social interaction. And that stage of life just ended. It's disorienting. Sometimes endings happen without anticipation, meaning you didn't see it coming. And this type of ending can be shocking, regardless of the nature of the ending, whether you planned for it or whether it just happened, there's always some level of loss and grieving. When I ask retirees what they miss most about working, what do you think they say? Number one answer, relationships. Remember how retirement satisfaction and the quality of relationships are correlated? Same goes for work satisfaction. Relationships matter most. The change in relationships is more dramatic than many people expected. Now we'll move to the next stage, which is passage. This is when you transition from what was to what will be. It's the longest stage. How long? As long as it takes. Think years, not months. The more dramatic or traumatic the event, the longer passage takes. During this stage, mindset's critical. How we view or appraise an event like retirement influences what we think and how we feel. If you retired on your terms, you may be excited. But when retirement is unplanned or forced, it's much more challenging to welcome that transition. Regardless of how retirement begins, we want to intentionally shape this new season in life. Once you've successfully navigated passage, you reach the 4th stage, new normal. This is where you fully embrace your new life and you now identify as someone retired. Before we move on, I want to stress one more point. Do you see the circle with ending? Notice how ending overlaps anticipation and passage. Remember my light bulb moment that forced me to rethink how I approach financial planning? It was when I noticed that financial decisions made in and around life events, or the ending stage, had the greatest impact on someone's future net worth and quality of life. The overlap areas are what I meant when I said in and around life events. This is when you want to slow down, relax, and process what you're thinking and how you're feeling before you make any big decisions. See my coffee cup? Consider what you're thinking and how you're feeling before you decide what to do. These are the decisions that you want to get right, or at the very least, defer those decisions so you don't get them wrong. If you want to better understand how your thoughts and feelings influence your decisions, check out the book Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. It's one of my favorites. Now let's dig deeper into making financial decisions during the transition to retirement. We'll start by recognizing that money has 2 sides. There's the technical side, where we get our ducks in a row, think about what ifs and what could go wrong. And there's the personal side or the human side, which drives what we want to get right. Both sides are equally important. Let's look at an example. How many years on average does someone live after an initial diagnosis of Alzheimer's? What do you think? Recent research suggests it's about 10 years. What if you received this diagnosis? What would go through your mind? Take a look at the list on the screen. I've had this conversation many times. Actually, there isn't a year that goes by where either a client or family member of a client deals with this. Unfortunately, it's common and it's scary. People worry about how much it may cost, what insurance covers, whether they're going to have the right legal documents in place. They also worry about how it'll impact them personally and the people around them. When life happens, people think about the technical and personal sides of money. That's normal, but it's the personal side that drives decision making. If this happened to you, how would you approach it? We have a process that we use whenever someone requests a meeting. It works for a situation like this or any life event or transition. Here's how we help people. 4 questions. First, we ask what's going on. This is the situation or event that prompted someone to reach out to us. How did you get here is what led up to whatever's going on. Was it sudden? Did you anticipate it? Any major decisions or circumstances that brought you to this point are discussed during this time. Then we discuss what you're thinking. These may be decisions you're facing right now or options you're considering. Or in traumatic situations, you may not know what to do or feel frozen. Lastly, we discuss how you're feeling. Since the personal side of money drives decision making, this step is critical. Remember, if you want a deeper understanding of emotions, check out the book I mentioned earlier, Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. So far, we've discussed the old view of retirement versus the new view. We reviewed the 4 stages of transitions and our 4-step process for making decisions when life happens. Now let's talk about ways to enhance well-being. These 3 C's are a fresh way of thinking about structuring your life and managing your time and energy to enhance your well-being. The first C is community. What you do is important, but whom you do it with, even more so. Doing things with people you love and care about is great. It's also healthy to meet new people who don't think like you or have different experiences. Next is control. This is the freedom to live life on your terms. You decide how to invest your time, energy, and money in ways that matter to you. These are the things you want to get right. Contribution. Humans love being productive, especially when it makes a difference in the world. You know the feeling you get when you're doing something and you know you're right where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing? That's contribution. What types of activities include the 3 C's? Well, let's start by looking at 4 characteristics of activities before we identify the types. First is going to be routine. Activities should be regular, but not necessarily daily or weekly. Next is social. Why? Because life's a team sport. At least that's how I see it. Activities should be challenging. We love to learn and problem solve and figure things out. It's in our nature. It's why we love puzzles and games and addictive apps on our phones or iPads. Activities should be measurable. This means I know if I'm making progress or making a difference. Lots of activities have these characteristics. Work has them. So does volunteering at a nonprofit or a place of worship. Any group exercise or group activity works as well. Here's how this connects to retirement planning. When you're creating your retirement budget, consider activities with these characteristics. You may spend money on them, but they're not a typical expense like a utility bill or landscaping service. In many ways, they're more like an investment in your quality of life. Have you researched any retirement lifestyle communities? If so, you may have noticed how most, if not all of the activities they offer have these characteristics. Now let's move on to our last section, part 4. Now it's time for the big question. Are you ready? Are you ready to retire? Let's review the first 2 steps. You start by getting your ducks in a row, and then you focus on what you want to get right. But before we discuss what it means to be ready, I want to share something important that took me many years to fully appreciate, at least 20. This is near the top of the list titled, Things I Wish I Understood Better Earlier in My Career. Look closely at the road in the picture. What do you see up ahead? Can you see how the road curves sharply to the left? You see that? What do you think's around the corner? You may imagine the road continues on, but really, we don't know. Retirement's like that. We may have an idea of what we'll see, but we really won't know until we get there. Here's why this matters. When you retire, your view changes. More importantly, the context changes. Here's what that means. Before you go around the curve, you see it as someone who isn't retired. But when you go around the curve, now you're retired. You've transitioned to a different stage of life. And here's why that is so important. Context influences how you think and feel, and ultimately, how you make financial decisions. Before retirement, you view things from the context of someone who's still working. But after you're retired, you view things in a different context. And it's more than just a change of scenery. You've gone from earning, saving money, being frugal, to withdrawing money from retirement accounts, it's spending money. Life's different in so many ways. Being retirement isn't just a new view, it's a new perspective. You've already experienced this in your life. Think of other transitions. How about going from being a student to graduating or working full time? You had expectations of what that would be like. Have you been married or are you married? How different was that from being single? Do you have children? Remember planning for children, thinking about how you would parent? And you became a parent and wish there was a manual? It's a whole new world. Context changed and you have a new perspective on life. Retirement's no different. Remember when I talked about big financial decisions, RVs, boats, vacations, homes, the things that need keys? Context influences how we make these decisions. Let's take an example. Let's say during your working years, you vacationed in the mountains. You loved it so much, you thought, when I retire, I want a place in the mountains. It's peaceful. You love the view, the smell, pace of life. It was your escape from the grind when you were working. But when you retired, the context changed. Life isn't as much of a grind anymore. Now, Monday through Friday looks a lot like Saturday and Sunday. Being in the mountains doesn't feel much different than when you're at home. Maybe once you're retired, you'll love the mountains just as much or even more. Maybe the mountains won't feel quite the same as they did before. Here's the takeaway. It's hard to know how you'll feel about something during retirement until you're actually retired. I didn't understand this 25 years ago, and I've watched people make these big financial decisions as they enter retirement only to realize it's not quite what they expected. So, are you ready? Let's look at 5 areas to gauge readiness. All right, we're in the home stretch. This is our last section. As we explore these 5 areas, don't worry about taking lots of notes. We have a workbook that we can send by email, which includes what's on the slides and a whole lot more. As we review these areas, think of them more as an exploration, not questions that require a final answer. Context is going to change once you retire. You'll have a different perspective and you'll see some things differently. So plan on revisiting these areas. Let's look at the first area, financial. As we discussed earlier, you start by reviewing everything, getting organized, making sure your ducks are in a row. At first, it's common to feel a little bit scattered or overwhelmed, but as you work through getting organized, you'll begin to feel more confident, like you're doing the best you can with what you have. This is the key to worrying less about what could go wrong, so you can focus more on what to get right. As you progress on the financial part, you can begin to look at the personal side. Remember what influences retirement satisfaction the most? It's relationships. Be sure to take some time to think through this before and after you're retired, and pay special attention to any family members who live nearby because they may have their own expectations. What is the number one reason I've seen people move during retirement? Grandchildren. Context changed. They went from being a parent to a grandparent. For some people, that means it's time to move closer to the family. The second reason I see people move is a change in health. Be sure to think about your present home and whether it's equipped for aging. Climbing stairs, taking care of a yard, it can become challenging over time. Can you modify your current home if your physical ability declines? Would you have to move? So think through these things as you consider where you may live in the future. Are you satisfied with your current level of activity? Will it allow you to do what you want during retirement? Much of what could go wrong, or the things people worry about as they age, are related to declining health. That's what most people worry about, and for good reason. And in general, being healthy is necessary for whatever you want to get right. Whether it's travel, playing with grandkids, spending time with family and friends, being healthy makes everything better. Keep that in mind as you define what healthy means to you and make plans to live your best life. Transitioning to retirement often brings more freedom to live life on your terms. Now you can choose how to spend your time, energy, and money in ways that matter to you. Here's a question I'd like you to consider. When was the last time you did something for the first time? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Routine's important, especially if activities are social, challenging, and measurable. But as people age, routines can turn into Groundhog Day. While this may feel comfortable and safe, it isn't healthy for our brains. I remember learning about this years ago, and since then, I've tried to consciously do new things. It's healthy for my brain now, it'll be healthy for my brain in the future. As you consider these areas, it's time to stress test your scenarios. Here's what that means. Consider how much questions. How much money do you need to feel like you're okay? How much are your monthly expenses? How much can you reasonably withdraw from your retirement accounts? If you want to travel, how much can you spend on vacations? How much questions are answered with numbers? What if questions are a combination of financial and personal? Many are about what could go wrong. It's the things people worry about, like having serious health issues and ending up in a nursing home for 5 or 10 years. Whether it's you or a family member, these are things that can keep you up at night. What if questions aren't just about things that could go wrong, they're also about what you want to get right. What if you bought a vacation home where you can make memories with your family? What if you joined a club to socialize and play pickleball? Again, we have a workbook that has a long list of what if questions to consider. When means adding a date to those decisions or scenarios and seeing what that means financially. During the financial planning process, we combine these questions. For example, what if you purchased a second home, like a condo on the beach, when you're retired? How much could you afford and still be okay? That's how we combine the questions to help you make decisions. Where do you start? Well, begin with our process. 4 questions. Think about what's going on right now. You may be planning to retire, or maybe you're already retired. Then review how you got to this place in your life. Next, remember my coffee mug. Take time to consider what you're thinking, how you're feeling before making any decisions. If you follow this process, you'll be in a much better position to make decisions that are right for you. Thanks for staying with us to the end. Please reach out to us through our website or social media if you want to connect. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I wish you the best in your retirement journey. Thanks again.